Hello, and welcome to the SCCM ICU Heroes for 2022. Today we are going to interview our team, and Dr. Marie Pavini will be conducting the interview, and I will turn it over to you, Marie. Thank you.
Thanks, Adair. Again, welcome to the Society of Critical Care Medicine's ICU Heroes Award winner interview 2022. I would like to thank SCCM Thrive Patient and Family Support Committee's Adair Andrews for putting this all together. The ICU Heroes Award recognizes that patients and families are an integral part of the intensive care unit. The award is given to an ICU patient and family and to the multi-professional team that delivered the care. My name is Marie Pavini. I am an ICU physician in Vermont and a member of the Thrive Patient and Family Support Committee. I'm delighted to bring you the story of John and June Rosen. John is the 2022 ICU Heroes Award winner and ICU survivor. John and his wife, June, are accompanied today by Dr. Nitin Puri and the all-star team at the Viner ICU at Cooper Health in Camden, New Jersey. Welcome, Dr. Puri. Would you do us the honor of introducing yourself and your team?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to the Society for the recognition. Like I said, I'm Nitin Puri. I am the director of the Viner Intensive Care Unit, the co-director for Critical Care Services, and the division head for Critical Care at Cooper University Hospital in Camden, New Jersey. My colleague here, Dr. Adam Green, aka partner in crime, is the head of one of our community sites in Spira Hospital in Vineland, head of critical care, a vital member of the ECMO team, and also a member of our peer support group. And together we played a role in having the opportunity to care for John and develop a special relationship with June Rosen.
Thank you. And would you be able to give us a quick medical summary of John's stay at Cooper?
So John came to us during the first surge of the spring of 2020. He got sick while caring for others. John, baseline, has hero in his DNA. He was in one of the intensive care units that we had to open up on one of our medical floors. He was recovering. He was about 10 days into his stay, and then took a second hit, got significantly worse. And we put him on VV ECMO. I think most people remember the time it wasn't clear if VV ECMO would work or not. And John then proceeded to have an extraordinarily long stay. I think overall spent about a couple months with us in the hospital and then going through rehab, but is able to get better. And I'm glad we'll all be able to be here today.
Great. Okay, thank you. And John and June, welcome. And would you help us with your professional backgrounds?
Sure. Well, my background, I've been a nurse for a long time. Started out in critical care, actually before that as a paramedic, and then critical care, nursing, and then emergency departments and trauma, and then ran emergency departments, and then moved out and went into the medical device sales space, managing teams, and then decided to go back into nursing. And unfortunately, that's when I got sick. So while working as a overnight nursing supervisor at a facility. So that was sort of a quick background for me. And June, you can.
Well, thank you so much for having us. I intentionally did not wear mascara. I knew that I'd just see Dr. Puri and start to cry. So just a little bit about my background. I'm trained as a mental health therapist and moved into the coaching world, and I work specifically with women around leadership. It's a short story.
Very nice, very nice. John, so when you were a clinical nurse, did you think about extreme or prolonged treatment plans like you had for patients that were not doing well or having a poor prognosis?
Well, certainly, I mean, there's always the the care that someone that you provide to someone who's either long-term or has the potential for long-term, and managing. I mean, from the simple of nursing, of making sure they're turned so they're not developing a secondary bed sore that turns into an infection and sepsis and so on. So you're always thinking through that. Also thinking of, to what extent do you continue to provide extraordinary measures for someone? And I've had that thought often, and recently thought, I'm so glad my team did not, because there's plenty of times where there's probably that question in somebody's mind. Is this an extraordinary measure that may not have the outcome that we hope for?
Right. And in this day and age, with such strong palliative care teams, we think about it and talk about it all the time. What's too heroic, right? And what should we be doing? So it's a very difficult question. What did you think about patients after they had mostly recovered and were leaving the ICU? Did you think about what was happening to them afterward, or were you just sort of happy that they made it through your care?
Well, I was in the beginning of COVID, so I really didn't have the experience of COVID patients. I had the experience of presumptive COVID that we never heard again from. So I was really not, in the trenches dealing with someone with COVID and then the going home. At that time, specifically ventilator, what I knew was you didn't get off the ventilator. If you had COVID and you went on a ventilator, the chances were you were not coming off that ventilator one way or the other.
And not even so much during COVID, not even so much during COVID itself, but in general, after you work on patients for a very long time and you're successful and the patient survives and is able to leave the ICU, do you have contact with them after, or do you sort of think that the ICU team did a good job and don't think too much about what happens after the ICU for patients?
Yeah, I never had contact after the fact. I mean, maybe a family would come in with, this was years ago, but maybe a family would come in and, thank us or bring a tray of cookies. In the emergency department, which is really where my career went for so long, the emergency department, just by nature, in and out, and you never see them again, unless they return, the frequent flyers, unless they return. But really never had contact again with families or specifically patients. I do recall a family member who patient that came in often, and I became their primary caretaker, and they were looking for me when they would come in. I think they had cancer, they were on chemo, their port would always get clogged, and I was, I had the magic touch to be able to unclog that port. So they always looked for me. And after they unfortunately passed away, the family would continue to, from time to time, come in and say hello if they were passing by. But that's pretty much the extent of it.
That's great. I mean, it is special when we make these connections. It's not often, but it's special. Dr. Puri, what was going on with COVID at the time of John's stay? I understand it was early in the COVID days. What was visitation like?
Yeah, well, I can tell you exactly what visitation was. There wasn't any. New Jersey had a color code system similar to a stoplight, and it was red. So all visitation was halted. Everything, we'd started a unique program to get our medical students to call the families, and then that would be followed up by a phone call with the attending physician. A lot of FaceTime, use of new technology, and we were extraordinarily busy. The hospital had shut down. We had multiple ICUs filled with COVID patients, and we had opened up ICUs on a telemetry unit. And, that's when we developed the relationship with June. June became one of us at that time
That's
because
wonderful.
she used, I think, some of her therapy skill set to help heal us as we went through the moment.
So the date of this interview was March 16th, which is World Delirium Awareness Day. Tell me, did John have any bouts with delirium?
John had significant bouts with delirium. He can vividly describe, and then John, I'll defer to you about something about ice cream and pineapple or something to the effect of, extraordinarily confused, because Adam and I can talk about this, sedating and trying to work with COVID patients is much more difficult than we've had with a standard ICU patient. With ARDS, and we ended up using a lot of medications we would normally have to use because the stays were significantly longer.
Yeah, we'd like to use early mobilization and sedation minimization whenever possible, but there's just some times that you can't. When someone's being proned and they're in their second bout of ARDS, there's no role for it, and we just have to brace ourselves, right?
Yeah.
June, when I was watching a clip from you before, you mentioned that not that you're particularly religious, but there were some clergy involved, and you learned to pray, and there was a chain of prayer. What was that about?
So I think when John initially went to the hospital, in my mind, because he's always my hero, right? He's always the backbone here. And I really thought, he's going to go, he's going to get hydrated, and then he's coming home. And of course, that wasn't at all what happened. And very quickly, things got really scary. And going, on the ventilator, like really quickly. And so right away, the tenor of everything changed. And I kind of made a real decision for myself that the only way through this was just a mindset of positivity. That literally the only way that I would be able to get through this is the outcome is he's coming home. And so every single person I talked to on the phone, I just made it really clear. Like this is like, we're not talking about any other scenario. And I figured if in the event that happened, then we'll deal with that. But right now we have to just open things up, just that he's coming home, and that's the way it's going to be, definitively. And so what happened is a friend of mine said, there's this caring bridge, like you can't keep texting. It's getting longer and longer, because the more severe John got, the more people started to sort of funnel in. And it was a time that was when the whole world was shutting down with COVID, but nobody necessarily knew anyone with COVID. So here, my husband, working in the capacity of a nursing supervisor, he gets COVID. And so everyone is shuttered. The word shuttered, I don't even know the word shuttered. And the birds are now singing, and the sky is blue, and there's no traffic. And everybody is now a lot of people started to focus on our story. And just support came from friends of friends of friends. And a friend of mine said, wow, you really have a love army. And I said, wow, that really is what it feels like. We have a love army. And they all got the memo that we're doing this in a really positive way. So what happened is, from one of the people inside of that love army, a few dear friends of mine from college, like that I hadn't even seen in 20 years, but we're still so connected at the heart. They asked if they could do a prayer circle. And again, not particularly religious, but spiritual. And we're Jewish, but we're not, we're more, for me personally, more spiritual. They started this very powerful, the Love Army's prayer circle from 3 to 3:30 every single day. And they did it every single day. They committed to it until he got home. And that's what they would say. They would say, we're going to do this every single day until he gets home. And I'm like, wow, no one knew what they were in for on day one of that it would be like 78 days later, something like that, before he actually came home. And so there were people inside of that, our cantor, and other cantors, other people that had grown up in the Catholic faith, that they were starting to say these stories about, we talked about like living in the field of miracles, because that's what it felt like we were up against. And one woman in particular came to me who had spent her whole life in clergy and said, I never really understood prayer until now. And what it was this collective vision of positivity of people just sort of dedicated to saving one man's life, really is what it felt like. And as I developed this relationship with the doctors and the nurses, I would tell the Love Army about them, and then I would tell them about the Love Army. And so I think it was an anchor really for all of us to hold on to something during a time that everything felt so out of control. And even with some of the ICU doctors saying, we know how to do everything. Like we have the book, this happens, and we do this happens, and we don't know exactly what we're doing. I mean, they were honest, in some of those very intimate conversations. And but yes, it was clear that they were doing absolutely everything. So I think that's what
people came to join you. Just remarkable how many people came out to join you, and so early on, and what an outpouring of love. It's incredible. John, you said a friend had said to you, how's your head? I know how your body must be this and that, but how's your head? And what was the first thing that came to your mind when you heard that question?
Well, again, remember, my background is, many, many, many years in, emergency departments and trauma and paramedic, so you kind of brush that stuff off, almost as a defense mechanism, for self-preservation. You just, blow that stuff off. And that's the way I was, and that's the way I've always been. And the friend that you mentioned happens to be another, I referred to as one of my COVID brothers, another survivor who we met on, our wives met when I was in the hospital. He was already out. He and I met after the fact, and, we're a support system, and the peer support group that Cooper set up, there's a number of us that have become, I would say, not all males. So I'm saying COVID brother, but it's brothers and sisters, that, we share something unique, that we have together. Anyway, in that one of my conversations after one of the peer support group, Zoom meetings, he and I got on the phone with each other after the fact, and we were talking. And it was the first time that we had really spoken to each other, not on a Zoom call. And, he was impressed that I, made it out of rehab. And then I decided to keep pushing myself and go to the gym. And then I was, working out, and he still wasn't able to do that. And really, from my conversation said, you know what, I'm calling a friend who's a trainer. I'm going to start tomorrow. So I gave him that. I'm like, okay, that's great. Keep at it. And then he said to me, so how's your head? So that's where that comes from. And, my immediate reaction was, oh, it's fine. I'm like, that's, you just, and then I stopped and, I said, everybody keeps telling me it's not going to be fine. The team from the ICU said that. They had pre-set up the psychologist who specializes in ICU PTSD, who has a 3-year waiting list, but had my name flagged. If ever shows up, he's in. So with that conversation with that friend, COVID brother friend, I decided to, maybe I need to, let's check that out. Maybe I wasn't admitting to myself or anybody else, or they probably already knew that I wasn't handling it as well as I had thought or hoped. So from there I started, and it's been great.
So John, were you having any, noticeable changes in yourself after the ICU, in social situations or your job or your memory?
all of that.
Yeah. So, memory, of course, during the ICU stay, there is, none. They are vivid, Technicolor vivid dreams that I remember. And many of the dreams have aspects that are real. So if that's the delirium. So for example, every room I was in my dreams, every house, every building, all had glass walls, and glass doors. And of course, the ICU is glass walls and glass doors. I had a string, in my dream, it was a ribbon of an OR, the green OR towels. It was a ribbon of that material hanging from my thumb, just this long ribbon that I'd be running around with this hanging from my thumb. And I kept thinking I should put that down next time I go out running around, not running and purposely, just running around. And that I'm sure that's the A line, the arterial line that once it's in and secured, it dangles. I had the same thing with what I thought were these Roman sandals that I must have brought from home that I can't imagine why they strap, twist up my leg, my calf. Well, that I'm sure were compression boots. And so there's those things that are based in reality of memory. So that's the memory of other areas. I'm going to say it's crazy, but it obviously it's not. I was terrified when I go to appointments. I was terrified to get in an elevator, not because of claustrophobia, because I didn't want to be exposed to anybody else. I was worried that I'd be, re-exposed to people. So I was terrified to do that.
But no, John, when you saw my wife and I, you came and gave me a big hug and told my wife how great I was. So you got over that at that moment.
Yeah, like I also took the stairs that day.
And June, what about yourself? Have you heard of PICS-F, post-intensive care syndrome for families?
Who talked to me about that was Dr. Dillinger. I'm not sure I'm saying his name correctly. But I had heard about this renowned doctor that used to run the ICU at Cooper, who was still an attending. And I had kept leaving messages to talk to him. And he eventually called me and he said, I thought you were just looking for information about your husband. Now I get you really wanted to talk to me. I did. I really wanted to talk to him because, he had this incredible reputation, and I was curious about that very thing. What do I need to know? What do I need to know with John coming home? And that's what he said. He said, it's going to be, it could be, and he's got this beautiful twang and it just such kindness in his voice. But he said, it may take him a year to balance a checkbook. Even that I wasn't prepared to hear. And that's not actually what happened.
Because I've never
never
been able to balance a checkbook.
Never been able to balance a checkbook. But he talked about, the post-traumatic stress and what that could mean for John and the whole family. And that's when I contacted the social worker who connected me to the psychiatrist. I think maybe it was a psychiatrist who was connecting me with another psychiatrist, the one that John ended up actually seeing, because it just seemed like that is very, even though I knew I would have to push him to go there, that it was probably a really good idea for all of us. And that was hopefully in the event that he would actually get out of the hospital. All these things started to be put in place while he was still in the ICU. But it was, I think, really helpful for him, for all of us, for John to start to be able to see somebody at Cooper, to start to unpack what actually happened. And so much happened to him and the world.
Yeah. And it sounds like that it was great that you had someone to ask your questions to also.
Oh my goodness.
That,
yeah.
We can't forget
one
about
of the
the
things I
family,
learned too. was this was being connected to a teaching hospital. I had no idea. I know, I never had been in this situation before, but the fact that it was a teaching hospital and that we had so much contact with everybody, the attendings, and then the residents and the fellows, and and then even the brand new med students that would call. I mean, it made a huge difference. Huge, because I didn't feel so alone in it. And they were, I couldn't go into the hospital to see him, right? We weren't allowed in the hospital, which is like 10 minutes from my house and a whole other world. Like when I finally drove to the hospital, I felt like I'd literally been talking to people about John that were on another planet, because it felt like I had no access. They had the access and they were giving me all the information. When I actually drove to Cooper Hospital, I'm like, I cannot believe, like, I live practically next to Cooper Hospital. But what kept me glued together was so many points of contact. And what kept me hopeful was that although they always said, he's in critical care, right? This is critical. And they never gave me false hope. They gave me kindness, real deep kindness, and that equated to hope. Like it seemed like the same thing, like because they were so kind. Like maybe they would be more curt or less connected if there was no hope. So in my mind, all of that deep connection was like, okay, we're all really going to be hopeful together.
And speaking of hope, I guess do we have Adam Green on the call with us today?
Yep, I'm still here.
Hi. So Dr. Green, I keep hearing about his physical activity, John's physical activity, and competitions and things. What's all that about?
So, well, I guess John and I think I would say have developed a friendship after, and mostly consists of getting a cup of coffee every 6 months or so. And I think maybe, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 6 or 9 months ago, we were talking and I was talking about a race that I was doing coming up, and he said, "Oh, I think I can do that." And so I said, "Okay, let's do it." And so we picked a race, and we're going to be doing a triathlon together. And I haven't decided if I'm going to race with him or if I'm going to try to leave him in the dust. But I figured it'll be a fun experience no matter what.
When is this race? When is this challenge?
So when is it, John? I think July, is that right? Or September? I don't know. I made it up.
August 7th.
There you go. Yeah. See, I don't even know when it is.
August 7th. Yeah.
Yep. So.
I mean, that's like that's pretty amazing, I think.
Yeah.
And one other ICU doctor, Dr. Damas, is going to be joining us, I believe.
Yeah, she hasn't registered yet, but she said she would. So.
That's great that you're able to keep these connections so long afterward, and that you're watching out for each other. I mean, that's what we all need to do. It's so nice to hear. Dr. Puri, can you tell me a little bit about the PICS clinics and a peer group and how June and John have enhanced it?
Yeah, 100%. So we started Peer Survivor Group prior to COVID. We were part of Thrive. Krista Shore, helped lead that initiative, along with a multidisciplinary group at Cooper, our physical therapists and speech therapists and social worker and occupational therapists. And but then once COVID came, we couldn't meet in person, right? So it had to become virtual, and we, in some sense, the clinic was refounded with June and John being the anchors. And they would, they'd be like, "Listen, we're going to be on." And, I think there was probably some backroom dealing where they got other people to join. And, and you'd have a screen full of people. And the first time we did it, which is entirely outside of the Thrive guidelines, they were like, they just asked me, and I think Dr. Bartok was on, one of my colleagues, and said, "How are you guys doing?" And I think all of the clinical people who were on, we had to turn off our cameras because we weren't doing well, and because it was rough. And what it was is that, like, and, you know, I think this is something that's deeply powerful about us with Cooper, is that we're a community, and we're looking out for each other. So, you know, it's definitely a proper peer survivor support group now. But John and June, Antonio Ellis, some of these people who are early survivors of something that a lot of people weren't surviving, helped us get through the moment. And we do it quarterly. We'd like to do it more often. We don't have a formal PICS clinic. One of our faculty, Dr. Latano, has a robust pulmonary clinic where people come to, and has developed a long-term relationship. She sort of looks at people who've been long-term ICU patients and then survivors, and you know, continuing to develop it. But this idea of teaching hospital with fellows, a robust critical care service, that like care just doesn't stop when you leave the ICU, as you said. Like, these are lifelong relationships, and these relationships continue to feed back mutually. Is something that we appreciate much more today than we did in April of 2020.
Understood. John and June, what do you think about these groups? And is it any different because it's remote?
Well, you know, I don't have a sense of it not being remote. So that, you know, it's sort of like the 2-year-olds that never knew not wearing a mask, right? It's a new world that I've not, you know, I wasn't part of the survivor group prior to Zoom. I can tell you that like I mentioned earlier, the people on the call, the survivors, if you will, you know, we have a unique kinship to each other. And I remember it was either the first time or second time, there was, you know, each one of us went around the Zoom screen and kind of told our story. And I think it was the PT therapist that was on that call that was asking about our post-ICU rehab journey. And each one of us told our story to the group, to each other. And with that, we described each one of us as individuals, how we each, you know, I described how I got to rehab, and and they told me it would be at least 3 weeks. And I pushed myself to the point where, you know, they called June to tell him to, you know, be safer, because we're worried he's doing too much too fast. And in a week I got out of rehab, and then I went into outpatient rehab and pushed myself. So it was continually like pushing and driving and striving to regain everything I lost. Because, you know, remember when I woke up, you know, I had a trach in, I couldn't talk, they were thrilled that I could move my big toe. I had zero strength. I'd lost, you know, over 50 pounds, all muscle wasting. And I had to learn how to walk and talk and swallow, and, you know, all that you all are familiar with. I was not. And as each one went around the room, the Zoom room that is, they all told similar stories. And it was June who, after the fact, said, you know, I don't know if you realized or caught what happened on that call. And it was her, you know, June pointed out that each one of us had the same, you know, internal drive to overperform and push further than was expected, each one on that call. So whether that was unique to just us, you know, this sort of small band of rehab achievers, or whether that's innate in all humans, I don't know. But it was pretty interesting to know that all of those on the call, that we've all identified with each other, the fact that we have all been through it and pushed further and harder to get past it. And we've become, you know, friends, you know, friendly, you know, we talk not just on those calls. You know, for me, one of the things interesting was when June talked about the Love Army and the phone call and the physicians and the whole ICU team, the nurses and everybody becoming part of the Love Army as well. And then once I was awake and told about that, and, you know, sort of tried to grasp what that is, and the fact that there were so many people. I mean, there was, you know, on that Caring Bridge, there was, you know, something like 700 plus people on Caring Bridge, and viewed it 22,000 times. And the phone call every day is, you know, 20 to 60 people. Anyway, I remember when I first got home, and I knew one of the doctor's names. The only doctor I could remember their name was the surgeon that did the wedge resection, and he had a unique name that I somehow remembered. And I was by myself eating a sandwich for the first time home. I was home for 2 days, and I decided to call and try to get this guy to, just to say thank you.
Dr. Schurscher.
Dr. Schurscher. And he called me back, and I was saying, like, I don't know how to thank you, for what you've done. And he goes, believe me, just you calling me is thanks enough. And and I said, I don't even know who to thank. He goes, there were over 100 physicians daily that consulted on your case. There's a lot of people in your corner. And with that wasn't better. That made it worse. That was like, now talk about being humbled. How do you thank a group of people that, that not only saved your life, but went up and not only went above and beyond, but didn't stop and cared, not just for me, but for June and my entire family. What do you do and how do you do it? So I decided I was going to, sneak in, I talked to one of the nurses and, the nurse educator, and they stuck me into the ICU because remember that there was still no visitors allowed. And they stuck June and I in, and, I just wanted to say hello and thank you. And I didn't know if that was going to be enough. And when everybody was standing there, of course, all masked, you could see the grin poking out, by the side of their mask, the smile. They looked at me, and then there were tears coming down people's faces. And I'm thinking, well, they're not crying for me, and they're not crying because they're seeing me. They're crying for all that they've gone through. And the fact that I could stand here and look at that point as good as I could look then, look better now, I hope. To me, finally, is when I got the sense of that's the thank you that I need to show them that thank you. Part of why I'm doing this, the race with Adam, with Dr. Green, is to show them that what they do matters. That there is something more, and that as hard as they're working and not only putting themselves through and through COVID, putting their families through and their loved ones. I mean, going home, and I know I used to go home and take my clothes off in the garage and hope nobody was watching in the window while I ran in to take a shower, and even that didn't help. And here are these group who were, suiting up to go in and, intubate and put lines of, ECMO lines in me.
I can say that
Anyway.
I understand that emotion completely. Gowning up and going in to do an intubation that's going to be difficult and could threaten your life. And I've had also the great emotion of standing in a line as a patient is leaving the ICU. And you're absolutely right. You feel all those emotions for everything that you've already been through and the patient that's leaving. And I also am familiar with, a victim mentality that lots of patients who have post-intensive care syndrome develop. They sort of feel that their life should be an open book for people to be able to save them. And they become at everybody's mercy and lose privacy and become very passive. And so it sounds like you were not that way. And it sounds like the people in your group were not that way. So June may be right, that there is something about your group. And maybe we need to recognize that if people don't have that trait that you have, that we need to really jump on that as mental health professionals and try to get people to, what do you think about that, June?
Well, I totally agree. I really, I think if we can cultivate love armies, that's something that's missing. And I think that when we talked before, and Dr. Puri and I talked about that when we were talking just a little while ago about, maybe, I didn't know that I could actually talk to a doctor. Every time, my experience is not in an ICU, so my experience is going and seeing a primary care doctor, and they're always so busy, and they got to get in, they got to get out. I didn't think there was any room for literally asking much. It's always felt very, but this idea that we can care for one another, right? That we do, as John as a patient can make an impact on the doctors, feels so good, because all we want to do is be able to express our level of gratitude. So to know that him just showing up to say thank you actually means something, then we will show up, because it feels so much better to be connected than disconnected. So yeah, I think I think cultivating love armies is a necessity for sure.
That's great. And hopefully we learn from this. John, June, Dr. Nitin Puri, Dr. Adam Green, Adair Andrews, and the Cooper ICU staff, I want to thank you so much for joining me here at SCCM 2022. Hearing your stories helps us to learn and improve, and your story is remarkable indeed. Congratulations on your SCCM ICU Heroes Award, and thank you to all who were able to join us today. Goodbye for now, and have a great Congress.
Thank you.